Hello, and welcome to today's ACMP member webinar. Our topic today is In Pursuit of the Relevant Change Strategy, and it will be presented by Vanessa Juan. My name is Michelle Levy, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I would like to share some information on the latest happenings at ACMP. We have several terrific educational opportunities coming up. The first, of course, is Change San Diego, and it will be held in person February 29th through March 2nd of this year. Also, we have the Change Management Global Connect 2024, which will be held virtually June 11th through June 13th. ACMP's prestigious certification program has over 2,000 CCMPs. Now is the time to join this elite class of change management professionals and experience the opportunities the CCMP will open up for you. For more information on applying or for renewing your CCMP, please visit acmpglobal.org/CCMP. One of the most valued member benefits is our ACMP resource library, where you can access 10 years worth of member-only tools, webinars, conference presentations, and white papers. The resource library is consistently ranked as one of our top member benefits, so we hope you will take advantage of it. And this resource library is where you will find the recording and a copy of the slides for this presentation in about 48 hours after the webinar completes. Our next webinar is on Thursday, February 22nd, and the topic is The Future of Change Management, Integrating Wellness and Purpose. Be sure to register for this event at our calendar at acmpglobal.org and discover other educational opportunities that might interest you. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. All audio lines have been muted, and today's webinar will run until 1 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have comments or questions during the presentation, post it in the chat. And throughout the presentation, you will be asked questions that also will be posted in the chat. Questions for the presenter will be answered at the end of the presentation. And now, I would like to introduce today's presenter. With over 3 decades of experience across 4 different divisions, marketing, finance, corporate strategy, and IT, Vanessa Juan is a dedicated advocate for human-centric strategy realization. She's experienced in leading transformation management teams responsible for design and execution of strategic digital portfolios valued at more than $2 billion. She has also established a new internal change management learning and development program at a top Fortune 500 company, among other achievements. Thank you for joining us today, Vanessa. And with that, I will turn this over to you to get started.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are calling from. I saw a few international attendants here on the chat, so welcome to today's webinar on building a relevant, doesn't have to be perfect, focus on the relevant piece. We'll talk a lot about that today. I'm very excited to be here. I have always been passionate about people connections, and I am a product of those people connections. You know, individuals in my own professional, personal life, taking the time to share with me their learnings, their tips. That's why I can't wait to share this hour with you all. I'd like to start our lunch date here today by framing up an opportunity area in our profession. As new change practitioners, we become great at supporting change deliverables, stakeholder plans, change in comms, checklist, training calendars, and developing these robust change management activity plans, long list of change activities. In the last 3 decades, I have had a chance to talk to many business senior leaders across the company, and regrettably, sometimes the impression they have of change managers is not ideal. Over focusing on the tactical change activities, has oftentimes reduced our change practitioner's image with executives to the person that creates the stakeholder lists, or the person that comes up with the colorful slideshows, or the person that comes up with the creative icebreakers on virtual calls. And mind you, I'm not suggesting these tactics are not necessary. I'm only observing that many of us change practitioners struggle with articulating how our change deliverables fit into a holistic change strategy and how this strategy remains relevant in light of the constant changes that these digital transformation initiatives are facing. We struggle to communicate the significance of strategic thinking and strategic planning in the change management profession. So this course will discuss 3 areas that will strengthen the way you approach change, help you build a strategic approach to change management, and elevate your impact as change practitioners with executive leaders. So let's start. Destination, question mark. You join a new business transformation strategy team, or let's say you join a new agile team, a new digital project team, and you ask, where are we going with this initiative? Or some version of this, right? You say, what is this initiative's specific objectives? What are we trying to accomplish specifically? We'll start with a little action in the chat here, and Michelle's going to help me. Question in the chat. Yes or no? How many of you are pulled into initiatives that have not yet defined specific measurable objectives? Or perhaps digital projects that are not yet well defined? Any yeses in the chat, Michelle?
Oh, this is interesting. There is no no's at this time, so everything's a yes.
Lots of yeses, huh? Well,
Absolutely.
indeed.
Oh, this one says all the time. I like that one.
All the time, yes. That's like me. In my experience, I have found myself reading wordy project charters, wonderful words, right? With vague statements using the latest company buzzwords, or statements like, we're launching a new technology, new AI, because we want to modernize, right? Yes, but what do you want to achieve with this new technology? Where do you want to end up with this? Such a basic question, and yet the path is never clear in organizational transformational initiatives or even in digital, transformation projects. It hardly ever is like Google Maps when you type in, I need to go here, tell me exactly, how I'm going to get there. And mind you, I have heard experienced practitioners say to me, Vanessa, if you don't know where they're going, if they don't know where they're going, you cannot help them and you cannot build a change plan. And that's not completely wrong, actually. However, every single enterprise, strategic or digital transformation project that I've come across, project teams were not clear at the beginning of, what success looks like. They didn't really know the magnitude of change that would be required. So what can change practitioners do in these situations? Do we say, bye, call me in 6 months when you know exactly where you're going, when you know exactly how, what the change is and what the change impact is going to be? I mean, that's certainly one option. Knowing where we're going and understanding the shifts, the behavioral shifts that need to be made to achieve the change is fundamental information for a change practitioner. And I personally have found that it is advantageous to be part of the early formation of these initiatives. Let me share with you today 3 possible roles you can play in this early stages. The first is help the teams by starting with the big picture. What do I mean? Help the team define their strategy realization objectives through discussions about the external landscape or discussions about the internal strategic landscape. You know, nothing's more risky than a team embarking on a project that cannot tie back this digital solution, this deployment of something to the customer, to the business objectives, to your organization's objectives in a tangible manner. That's the key. Vague is easy to do. Tangible is the hard stuff, right? Nothing is more risky than not knowing what you're trying to achieve quantitatively. And digital teams especially struggle with quantifying their benefits. And teams need help doing this. Teams oftentimes benefit from having you, a practitioner that is perhaps not in a specific, functional area, perhaps not in a specific department, a third party essentially that can facilitate or help create these workshops. Design thinking is a fabulous tool to use when you're doing external landscaping, internal landscaping workshops, and it's so easy to get upskilled on. As an example, I love design thinking as a tool to leverage in these discussions. And external and internal landscape assessments in the early stages, have actually a dual purpose for us. One, they help the team clarify the strategic intent, which you gotta be clear up front, right? We all know how important it is to be clear on the intent. And two, it's a bonus. They help source your case for change, your quote unquote burning platform. So I find it very productive to be engaged early on. A second role you can play in the early stages of a project is ensuring that the teams are engaging the right people in this kind of definition phase, right? Help the teams be selective. You don't need representation of the entire company in this workshop. However, be inclusive of the appropriate groups that have an important stake or leaders of the groups or departments that will ensure the biggest impact of the change. Help the team perhaps through a roadmap exercise, as I have depicted here on the slide, to confirm that they have identified the right groups to engage, help them visualize it, right? It's different, like when you, instead of having a list of names, help visualize the org chart, the different org charts of the different groups. It's actually really easy to do these days with org charts readily available on Outlook. It's a cut and paste exercise, really. Do not assume that the project leaders know all the ins and outs of other departments that they're not a part of. That's one of the biggest blind spots I've found, right? Project leaders know their own department. They don't know so well the other department. Get experts from the other departments to help you map that out. Help identify leaders across functions that are influencers, so important, right? Not just, the manager, the people manager of the group, but who are the influencers in this organization? Individuals that employees talk to, those individuals that people respect and look up to and listen to. And then secondly here, help these teams in this early stage to develop what I call a co-creation mindset, where different functions are willing to create solutions together from the beginning. So you can help shape those workshops in a manner where the co-creation mindset is prominent. And a third role you can apply in early stages of the project is to facilitate a drawing session. I love this, where the team draws. You don't have to be an artist, it can be, sketches, but that you help the team draw, help visualize how will things work in the future state, right? After you've launched the whatever, after you've launched the AI application, after you've launched the new digital solution. It's only when we know exactly how things will work in the future that we can start identifying, what behaviors or skills will be needed in that future state. Future state visualizations help teams draw and describe the future state in a manner that even a broader stakeholder audience can understand and buy into, which is really helpful in this process. And as you facilitate these sessions, you're also ensuring that the future state is described from the human angle, right? How many times have we seen projects that always use the technology, the operational language, but no one has described the human angle on this? So the drawing helps you depict how will the marketing persona feel this new application? How will the supply chain manager, feel with this new application, this new digital solution, all the way down to our customer? These visualizations are helping the team remain externally focused by making intentional connections between the internal digital solutions and how customers will ultimately benefit. Sometimes the customer is forgotten here. So you're bringing that relevance up to the front of the planning phase. So I've provided you some possible roles you can play to help strengthen the project's strategic intent. The next area I want to discuss is your role with the bumps on the road, as I like to call it. One of the most common mistakes of change practitioners is to get so absorbed in the minutia of change tactics and comms development that we forget why we exist, why we were brought in to help project teams. We are here to find the bumps on the road. That's what we're here for. Let me explain. We're here to help deliver the digital transformation goals. We are here to ensure the business transformation gets done, gets realized. We are here to ensure that the new organization is launched successfully. Change management is effectively strategy realization, getting the strategy done. And strategy realization is about identifying and anticipating the roadblocks that prevent you from successfully getting your strategy done. So your role as change practitioners is to help identify these challenges. You're there to spot problems. You're a problem spotter. You're not there just to be the touchy-feely person, the person that's connected with the people. Yeah, that's important, of course, but you're there to help the teams anticipate business issues and make sure that your change strategy remains relevant to these issues. And how do we identify these problems? How do we identify these roadblocks? You stay connected to human stories, to the human stories. Listen to the stories of your leaders. Listen to what your employees are talking about. Listen to the stories from your key stakeholder groups, which sometimes are the other function that you're working with or the other division that you're working with. It's easy for technical and operational project experts to get lost in the details of the tactical execution of the plan, and then they either dismiss the people issues completely or think of the people issues as less important than the technology bug that we're trying to fix. Make sure as part of your change strategy that you establish feedback mechanisms that continuously helps leaders spot the pitfalls during implementation. Ways to identify the project blind spots. Listening mechanisms are at the core of an adaptive change strategy. They're at the core of a relevant change strategy. I have a question for the chat, and Michelle here is going to help me as well. Type in the chat, how do you collect feedback from sponsors, let's say? How do you collect feedback from your leaders or employees? What are some of your favorite feedback mechanisms? Let's see what we get, Michelle.
Oh, there's a lot going. Survey Monkey, one-on-one surveys, a lot of face-to-face engagement and conversations, regular conversations. That's another great one. Interviews, polls,
Very good.
governance meetings. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, I love
Yeah,
that one. Sometimes these
mentoring.
governance meetings is where you see, you know, who's on board and who's not on board. That's where people are sharing their concerns, right? The leaders are sharing their concerns.
Yeah.
Governance meetings, great. Mhm.
I see face-to-face interviews, and I was wondering, in this virtual world, are face-to-face interviews really in person, or is that with Zoom also? How do people do that when there are remote and virtual conversations?
Mm.
MS Teams they use, Zoom. Sue says we always prefer real face-to-face versus Zoom. It's
Ideally,
possible.
yeah, ideally. No,
Yeah.
great ideas, great suggestions I've seen. You know, a well-designed survey is obviously one of my favorites. Focus groups, right? Maybe you don't have to call them focus groups. You know, you can call them a little, you know, mini advisory board meeting, but they function as a focus group. Just reading on, I can actually see the chat now, Michelle, so that's as good.
Oh, Lori said listening tours. I've seen that effectively used at my organization. That's a great idea.
Indeed. Yes, that's very good because you could do it at different levels of the organization, right? Skip levels, sometimes smaller forums, maybe a manager with a smaller group of 5 rather than these, you know, the large town halls.
Mhm. Oh, this is interesting. We have a couple of people that are saying we have survey fatigue.
Yes, I have survey fatigue too. Yes. It's tough. It's tough. You got to really be careful about the questions you ask, you know, be as succinct in the number of questions, be mindful of the timing of your surveys. You know, we have so many sometimes that, you know, there's a corporate survey, there's an employee survey, and then you need something for more of your projects. So find out, you know, get a calendar to find out when everyone around the company is going to be sending out surveys so that you can not time it at the same time as your company survey, right? So timing is really key as well.
Absolutely. And Robert had a very interesting comment. He said, I wish, I hope, I wonder. It's a low footprint, decentralized engagement survey. And then I know our friend Wags, but he goes with just, I have one question for you. So it's not a 10 question survey. It's just a one question response. So those are some great ideas that I'm seeing on the chat.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, fantastic source of crowdsourcing here today. Some of my favorites, I think they've already been mentioned here on the chat, but you know, focus groups I mentioned, design thinking sessions in itself can be a great way to also be listening for concerns and feedback from the groups, employee circles, communities of practice, right? Communities of practice that meet on a regular basis, another source of regular and consistent feedback. And just one final note before moving forward on listening mechanisms, making sure you're always collecting not just the qualitative feedback, but the quantitative feedback through these mechanisms, right? Both, we need both. So your strategic and relevant change strategy, your change plan, is effectively a holistic machine that will spot and address roadblocks of your listening mechanisms. You know, if you've structured, you can structure your change strategies as I'm showing here as one idea. Your change strategy is structured around stakeholder groups or personas. As you build your plan, you take time to think about how does each key persona or stakeholder group want to hear news? How do they want to communicate? But importantly, how will you collect regular insights into their challenges in each stage of the project execution, right? A one-time survey or one-time focus group is not enough. Scheduling regular touch points is critical. You might even think about assigning change responsibility to project team members who sit in every meeting, right? And they can, gather that information, change agents, if you will, within different settings across the project. And feeding these insights to ensure your change strategy remains relevant, right? That you're adapting your tactics to the issues that come up, the feedback that you hear from your stakeholders. And then importantly, I would say when you're reporting to your executives about change progress, you always ensure you make the connection between, okay, this change activity, this seminar, this town hall, this community of practice, we're doing this, and this is how it fits in to address this project roadblock, right? Making those connections more visible, more intentional, so that executives can understand why we're doing these tactics. And employees also understand why we're doing these tactics. Here's another example. In many instances where you have several digital projects within the division's digital transformation portfolio, let's say you're managing a program of many different digital projects, it may be easier to organize your change strategy around key business areas, thinking about the impact to your global users, right? Let's say global marketing managers are going to face these problems, and this is how we're going to keep close to their challenges and issues as we roll this out. Or regional roles. Let's say we're rolling out something across manufacturing, and you want to stay in touch with, you want change deliverables and feedback mechanisms with your regional supply chain managers, because they will perceive things differently and have different challenges than perhaps at the subsidiary level, right? The local level. Perhaps you're working in marketing strategies or marketing digital solutions. So you want to target your change deliverables to address feedback from your managing directors of the subsidiary or business unit directors in the marketplace. And yet another option that I'll share as change strategy structure may be to organize your change strategy around the key areas of anticipated risk. This is another one that I've used in the past, is as an example, in advance of the first quarter of the year, when you're about to launch your strategies, you anticipate from discussing with key sponsors or key employees, you already anticipate 3 near-term risk areas. You anticipate 3 potential areas or roadblocks to the success of your digital portfolio. So you organize your change actions, your change tactical plan around these areas. For example, in this case, I'm saying, you know that leadership synergy and alignment are going to be key to success and a key roadblock if you don't address it. So you align all your change tactics around that specific risk. Clarity of intent and understanding the strategic intent of the digital portfolio, that's crucial for this to work. This is crucial for people to actually change their behaviors. If they don't understand the intent, they're not going to be willing to change. So you put actions around the intent, the clarity of intent. Or a very common one that, talking to William and the change meeting that we had recently in South Florida, resourcing. Resources is always a challenge as you're going. If you don't have enough people or funding to do it right, that could be a risk. So you prepare change tactics to address that risk. And I would say, in advance, say in this kind of, scenario, you plan for the first quarter, these are the 3 risks. It may be longer, maybe you say the first 6 months of the year. Or you say in advance of the second quarter, you may decide these are the 3 risks and they're still relevant. You continue with that. Or you decide, you know what, these risks are no longer relevant. I've addressed them. I need to adapt my change plan to address 3 new risk areas. So those are a few ideas on how you might want to structure your change strategy. Good discussion I'm seeing going on in the chat. I look forward to reading some of these, Michelle, in a moment. But I'll continue. The third, you know, we've helped the team get clearer on their destination, on their strategic intent. You've established a change strategy that identifies the bumps in the road, and it's done on a regular basis. Now you just need to convince your sponsor, convince your initiative lead to have the courage to reroute, to flex and adapt to the findings you bring forward. You know, you're collecting survey data, feedback, and now we need the courage to listen to this feedback and actually take action against that feedback. So take a second to reflect here, or if you want to share it in the chat, please do so. But take a moment to reflect. You find, you know, you get feedback, you get insights, you identify these challenges, and you're trying to influence rerouting discussions with your executive leaders. How do you do that? What are some things that you do to influence your executive leaders in these discussions? What do you do there? Maybe these are the leaders that they already think that the plan is perfect as it is. I don't want to change it. Or leaders that, you know, they don't want to change how they're approaching their town halls. Or leaders that really don't think there's a problem with their leader alignment or peer alignment, you know? They're not seeing it, they don't believe it. How do you influence? How do you have those conversations? Any tips coming through the chat?
There are. We have Daphne says, bring them back to their objectives.
Nice.
And Rudy's
Yes.
saying, remind them of the end game with examples. That's a very good point, with examples. Make it
So
real
key.
for them.
Yes, yes.
Don has a very unique way of doing it.
Blackmail, I see. Yes. Well, let me offer 6 quick tips for influencing these tough to move, hard-headed executive leaders. No, I don't mean to offend our executive leaders. Many of you must be our executive leaders yourself here.
Well,
But
you know, Vanessa, what you're talking about here, I think is so important, is because as change managers, we're here to help them enact the change that they are wanting. And sometimes change is difficult for humans. Well, oftentimes it's difficult. So I'm interested in hearing more about the suggestions that you have.
Yes, yeah. So let me offer a couple quick proven tips that I've come across and have come in handy. And I have had some great change mentors. Obviously, I didn't come up with these myself, but they've been so helpful to put in practice. First, set expectations with your leaders up front. You know, ideally, when you first get assigned to the change lead role, you know, set expectations that your change strategy is not going to be a static plan. And leaders that are more traditional in planning, maybe a little bit uncomfortable with this, right? Then you might find some of your agile leaders, and now in the digital space, you know, we're using a lot of agile, so agile leaders tend to be a little bit more open to having flexible planning, right? The second thing I would say is share the consequences of inaction on business results. So this goes back to the blackmail thing. It's kind of not blackmail, but in a sense, you're being very clear with that leader of the consequences of keeping the actions the same way, the consequence of them not changing the plan. So bring it back, and someone already said this in the chat as well, bring it back to the business goals of the program. So let's say the goal of this digital initiative or this specific digital solution is to transition 50% of manual effort to automation. And at the same time, we also want to attract and retain new talent. But if we don't do this, if we don't take an action around XYZ, if you don't do that, you will risk either delaying the adoption timelines of reaching that 50% goal that you had, or not achieving the target at all as per your plan. So bring it back to the way that they describe their business objectives. That's very key. Third, time is probably your number one enemy. I have to be honest, what these project sponsors, and having been a sponsor myself of many projects, it's, these leaders, they're stretched so thin that they often just don't have the time or even the capacity to absorb what you're telling them. So make sure you demand time to talk people roadblocks or people challenges upfront. Set some time apart in their calendar early on. Don't wait till the last minute. You know that the survey is going to happen here. You know that the town hall is going to happen here, or you know that the launch is going to happen, the deployment is going to happen here. Way in advance, months in advance. Block an hour, block 30 minutes with your senior leaders to have these discussions. And use their time wisely, of course, right? The worst thing you can do is waste their time with fluff. Be succinct, and importantly, create dialogue. Present a data point, ask a question. Present another data point, create a dialogue with your senior executives. Ask questions. What are your reflections? What can we do about this? Don't give them all the answers. Have them think and absorb the information you're sharing with them. 4, many business leaders are financially savvy and analytical. I would say most of them. So bring them data analytics in the change management space. How you present data matters. It does. Just because we're responsible for bringing forward the human stories does not mean that we don't need to bring forward quantitative data. Elevate your impact by using bar charts, pie charts, line graphs when reporting on your change progress. It will make a difference to be fact-based in your communication style. 5, in some situations, the best thing you could do is assign a messenger, that will help communicate your feedback that you're hearing. And they can be alongside you, someone that the leader trusts, someone that the leader listens to. And 6, by far my favorite, if there's one thing that I've learned, is that there's always different paths to take. Don't be so fixated in one way to tackle the problem. Give them routing options. Just like your GPS does, right? You type in the address and it says fastest route here, second option here, third route here, no tolls. Put them in the driver's seat. Leaders want to be in control. They want to be the ones making the decisions. So let them do that. Give them options to choose from. We could do this, or we could do that, or here's this one change structure, or here's another change strategy structure. Which one would you like? Or here's a tactical action. Which one do you prefer? So optionality is one way also to deliver your message. So as we start getting closer to the end of our time together, I will leave you with 3 calls to action. 1, don't be afraid to get engaged earlier with transformation teams. There is a valid, and actually it's super rewarding as a professional, a valuable and rewarding role you can play at that early stage of formation. 2, next time you define your change strategy, make sure you're building a holistic approach that continuously helps spot and address emerging roadblocks. Not a perfect plan. Focus your energy on making it relevant and dynamic. And finally, give it a shot and test out one of the different ways that you either heard in the chat or from me, different ways to communicate with your executives. And drop me a note on LinkedIn or on ACMP. Let me know how these worked out for you. Love to hear from you all. So Michelle, with that, I will transfer over to you because I want to open it up to some Q&A. And I think we had received some questions even ahead of the meeting as well.
We do. And again, just a reminder for everybody is to type your questions in the chat for Vanessa. And the first ones that we have, Vanessa, your concept of optionality and communication is a great thing for us to be reminded about. Teresa asked this question. She says, I would love to hear examples dealing with CFOs who have the mindset of black and white thinking, just telling them and they will do it, that more hands-off leader. And then Peter asks, can you give me some suggestions about how to handle communications with over-involved change sponsors? They say they really want us to be in charge, but they like to be really hands-on. So could you answer some or provide some suggestions for that?
Okay. So if I heard the question correctly, so how do you manage optionality with those that are more black and white? So I think for those are black and white, and this is a generalization, but my guess is that they do rely on analytics and facts. So my suggestion would be make sure that in each of the options you provide forward, you base it on fact, quantitative data. So there was one of the questions before that talked about that we had received beforehand, and I was able to add a slide in here. Let me see if I can get to that, because it'll show an example of what I mean by fact-based quantitative data, like a CFO would be asking for, and other executive business leaders. Here we go. Can you still see the slide, Michelle?
We can. And I think you're talking about, like I say, this is a data-rich environment we're in, and that increase in AI. So this is a great question.
Yes, yes, indeed. So when you're speaking with these executive leaders, they may tend to see everything black and white, and that's okay. That's how they're built. So bring back factual percentage numbers back to them. They tend to be moved more easily when they see data, numbers, charts, financials, if you have them as well. So, it could be, I'm just put in here a couple of examples, but you can measure anything. Maybe you want to measure if, leadership connections or alignment are improving, right? And you can ask the question, you can ask a question if employees perceive that there's an improvement in the alignment among your leaders. You can ask if employees perceive there's an improvement in more integrated and seamless execution. If they perceive there's a better sharing of innovation across departments, those are all things you can measure through either a questionnaire or even a focus group setting. You can measure the areas of capability that you want to invest in, by asking, what are the specific specific skill sets that you think you need more help with as an employee? And then you depict that in your findings in a pie chart, in this example is by a stakeholder group. So this is, our executives are saying that, 40% of the time they have a high level of understanding around this skill set. People managers 38, employees 35. So we plan to address this by doing this, right? So you can ask your employees, what are the most immediate challenges to execution that your teams are facing? And then also depict it in pie charts or in bar charts. You can ask a culture question. How easy is it to get things done in our company? And then monitor in a line graph, an example, monitor improvement of the score or the answer to that question throughout the deployment phase. You know, 1 month to month, maybe you don't do it month to month, maybe you do it quarterly. Are we improving the perception of that culture, or what you're trying to shift in your culture? The key is to communicate in unbiased, fact-based manner, especially to these executives that tend to be black and white. Michelle, do you mind sharing again the second question you had? I don't want to miss out on the second question.
Absolutely. This was the other end of the spectrum where we have somebody who likes to be over-involved.
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 Yeah, that's an interesting one. Generally, I haven't found that as much. I've found generally the struggle is having more, getting sponsors more engaged because they're so stretched. But if there were someone that were very much engaged, I would definitely try to take advantage of it and make sure that there's enough forums where they're sharing. If this is a person that's actually, has a lot of ideas, maybe this is, and it makes it difficult to actually get down to business. And I don't know if this is exactly what the person was thinking about, but perhaps you say, okay, we're going to go through 20 minutes of ideation. Let's discuss all possible alternatives. Great. Now let's prioritize those. And you might define a set of factors, how you choose to prioritize those. And then say, okay, or even say, with this leader, say, look, I appreciate the set of ideas. I'm going to take this back to my small working team, to the small change working team or project team, and I'm going to have them prioritize. So you're allowing yourself to actually be led by the team prioritization. If you find that the leader has way too many ideas that could never possibly be all done, right? So if it's a matter of prioritizing, which is really important, frankly, if you have too many ideas, too many tactics, you lose impact. You may lose impact. So those would be a suggestion I would have. Try to get their ideas, feel that they're contributing, that you're listening to them, and then maybe take a moment to prioritize those.
We've had some good questions on the executive communication and some of the other things you were talking about in your presentation related to actually looking at the process that people are incurring, the changes. And one of the questions has, oftentimes we find that issues occur in the handoffs between groups. And you talked about including subject matter experts from the different departments to help bridge those gaps and help confirm those crucial connections. Could you provide some more insight in that as to ways that we can help bridge those gaps?
Yes. I had mentioned earlier in the presentation that some of the biggest gaps I've come across is different functional areas not knowing enough about the other functional area. So let's say I'm in IT. I'm deploying this and I know exactly who in IT I need to engage, but my digital solution will be launched in manufacturing. Well, then when you're discussing, you're creating project teams and you're discussing change impact, you got to have experts in the manufacturing division, right? So you've got to create those linkages. You've got to spend time as a project team. You got to spend time understanding the organization that you are going to be impacting. And I would say at a quite, detailed degree. Put yourself in their shoes. You've got to be able to put yourself in their shoes, understand what they're faced with, what their priorities are, what their perception of the change will be. So it does take time, but I think it's just so crucial to being an effective, change lead, to developing a change plan. The hands-off question is more, I don't know if this is related to, if there was any other background around that, but I feel like sometimes, yeah, there is, you might launch a specific tactic with a project team at the center. And again, I don't know if this was the intent of the question, but then you have change agents at the local level, right? Or at the sites. And let's say you have a global team in the center, and then you have change agents at the different manufacturing sites, let's say, or the different subsidiary sites. And there could be this handoff, of either the way that you approach the change or even the way that you collect information. There's always benefits in standardizing, just saying up front that we're going to collect information in this manner. Lately, I've found that, we do want to leave a little bit of room of creativity and innovation to teams, especially at the sites, to figure out the best way to collect the information themselves. But maybe you could say, let's standardize how we bring that information back to the center. It could be in a standardized manner, right? So you get relevant and practical information back from these teams.
Those are good suggestions, Vanessa. Now, this in the chat is very interesting, that some of the questions, there was one that came from Shay and said, what do others do to explore and unpack fears? Because dealing with fears is part of dealing with change also. So I know that there's been a couple of comments in there, but Vanessa, do you have any other insights of how we help explore and unpack fears as part of change management?
Yeah, so I think talking through is the best, and having conversations and dialogue with those impacted by the change. And mind you, it starts with leaders. So a good amount of my time in leading with change is discussing the change with leaders and executives and trying to understand what are they worried about, asking, simple questions that, what's keeping you up at night, and understanding what your change sponsors are worried about. They are super experienced people, very knowledgeable. They wouldn't be where they're at without having, tremendous operational and leadership knowledge. They're very in tune with some of these issues already in advance of what you're launching. So it's really important to talk through some of the concerns that they have. And as you talk through, you can also, ask them also to make suggestions on how have they dealt with these challenges in the past? How have they dealt with, if they're concerned about another department not buying in, or, what has worked in the past? What hasn't worked in the past? Understanding why they have those fears a lot of the times has to do with past experiences. So why might have that happened in the past? What caused it? So that you can identify what might I want to do differently this time. And then also seeing, okay, does this resonate with you? Do you feel that if we do this, we might prevent some of this from happening? So making sure their fears are addressed as part of the change plan. That's one thing I would offer. And I'm only offering a suggestion with leaders, but that can be applied to stakeholder groups, to employee circles. Some of the best ideas comes from those circles and those discussions. You bring up the issues that they face, and together you come up with solutions. The best buy-in you can possibly have in a change plan is the solutions come from that team, from the ones that raise the concerns.
Vanessa, it's so interesting. We still have a long list of questions that haven't been answered, but I can see that our group is very engaged today. And but I did want to thank you and everybody for participating in the ACMP webinar today. And Vanessa, again, a wonderful presentation. You gave us great thoughts, and I know it will want to continue that conversation with you. For the people on the call, we wanted to let you know immediately following the webinar, the feedback survey will pop up, and we ask you to please take just a few moments to complete our survey, as the feedback that you give us helps us shape future webinars. And also, don't forget to join the webinar exchange community in ACMP Connect to continue the conversation and engage with our speaker and fellow participants. I know on the chat today, we've had a lot of great suggestions from the other folks on the call, so I'm going to be interested in reading back through those. And we just want to thank everybody for their participation. Like we said earlier, the recording will be available next week in the webinar section of ACMP's resource library, located on the ACMP website at acmpglobal.org. If you already have your CCMP, also remember that by attending webinars, you can earn PDUs towards maintaining your CCMP, so record your hours today. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Vanessa Juan, and to all of you participating. Have a great day.
Thank you to you, Michelle, too. Thank you, everyone. Great questions.